4 years after the death of Elijah McClain, 2 Aurora police officers involved are going on trial. My 7th grade teacher, Mr. Joyner, taught me a lesson that can be used in preschool. Praise in public.
I want to start by highlighting what did work in the system.
Criticize in private.
You might be listening, but you're not necessarily responding to the issues that they have.
Well, there is no private when the state legislature meets to discuss universal preschool problems. This week's Word of Thanks supports Alternatives to Violence, which helps domestic violence and trafficking victims in northern Colorado. And the state is still trying to track down a wolf supplier, which is unlikely to happen by the end of the year deadline. So what happens if the state violates its own law? A curious question that we'll answer next. It's been more than 4 years since 23-year-old Elijah McClain was stopped by police walking home from a convenience store in Aurora. 4 years since police restrained him and paramedics injected him with ketamine even though he had done nothing wrong. 4 years later, the trial begins for 2 Aurora police officers involved. Late this afternoon, the prosecution and defense laid out their cases for and against suspended officer Randy Rodema and former officer Jason Rosenblatt. The pair faced charges of reckless manslaughter and assault. Opening statements started around 3 this afternoon. The prosecution told the jury the officers violated policy by ignoring McClain's cries for help while they restrained him in a carotid hold, which is a neck hold, while he was on the ground. Defense attorneys put the blame on the paramedics who arrived on the scene and injected McClain with ketamine.
All of that, from the contact to the force to put him in the recovery position, was all pursuant to their training and all pursuant to the policy. Now, when Aurora Fire and Medical or a fire and rescue responded on scene, that became a complete and total control by the medics.
Now, I'm going to use some words this afternoon that one hopes never to have to use when describing the actions of a police officer. Words like excessive force, deliberate infliction of pain. And I'm going to use those words because the evidence in this case will establish beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendants, Mr. Rodema and Mr. Rosenblatt, violated their oaths, failed their oaths, failed the mandates of their own police department, and ultimately failed Elijah McClain.
The 2 paramedics who administered the ketamine are being tried separately, as is the 3rd officer who originally approached McClain. Those trials will take place later this fall. For so many refugees, America represents a safe haven. And that was the case for Ahmed Zenoldin. He and his family, refugees from Iraq, came to Denver just 10 months ago. But overnight, Ahmed was shot and killed while trying to stop a group of teens from stealing his car. Deputies are still looking for the suspects who did it.
My brother's dead by gunshot, just like that. It didn't take 10 minutes.
Ahmed's brother Mahmoud says he got a frantic call late Tuesday night from his father. Ahmed saw a group of teens stealing his car in the parking lot of his apartment near Quebec and Yale. But when he ran towards the driver's door to try and stop them, he was shot and killed. Mahmoud says their family picked America, and Colorado specifically, because they thought it would be safe.
We came in here, was thinking that was a safe state, but we spent 10 months, or maybe less than 10 months, and my brothers got killed. That's all of the story.
The Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office released photos of Ahmed's car, a 2012 Hyundai Sonata, Colorado license plate CLYX69, one of the green on white license plates. They believe 4 black men, possibly under the ages of 18, shot Ahmed, then took that car. Explain this to me like I'm a 2-year-old. It's a line that has always stuck with me from the movie Philadelphia, and it's helpful on a story about 4-year-olds. The people in charge of Colorado's new universal preschool program were called to the legislature today to update lawmakers on issues we've focused on here. Issues best explained like we're all a 4-year-old.
I want to start by highlighting what did work in the system.
I learned this a few years after preschool, but before you give constructive criticism, it's best to start positive.
Colorado is now 8th in the country in terms of 4-year-olds enrolled in preschool.
Universal preschool issues we've investigated in the last 2 months were the focus of this hearing in front of state lawmakers. Issues laid out by Universal Preschool Program Director Dawn Odine.
We've most commonly heard questions about the matching system, about funding structures, and communications around full-day preschool services for children with qualifying factors.
Last month, 6 school districts sued the state over universal preschool, asking a judge to give power back to the districts to place students in schools instead of an algorithm run by the state. The lawsuit also asks a judge to force the state to pay full-day funding for 9,100 preschoolers whose families thought they qualified until they were told the money was not there.
And what we've done behind the scenes to address these challenges hasn't been something you or the broader public has heard enough about.
Odine talked about
Standing up this
tweaks
new
to the
program
matching
required a
system
lot
that
of
would lessen
decisions
the
to be
burden on preschool providers. She also gave a forward-looking focus on making the system easier for providers and parents, but without many specifics.
So we've already started working on solutions that will enhance the experience for both of them starting next year.
I heard you all say we're working on year 2 enhancements, and that really concerns me because we haven't even got through year 1.
One of the year 1 concerns was around students with special education needs, students with IEPs, individualized educational programs. That lawsuit I mentioned earlier also claims that if a state matches a preschooler to a school that cannot support that student's IEP, that school district the student lives in could still be sued, even though it had no role in matching the student to the wrong school.
We have planned enhancements for next year that will include the pre-population of students with an IEP prior to matching.
I want to clarify a statistic you heard in that story. The executive director, Lisa Roy, said preschool enrollment is 8th in the country. But the most recent nationwide data is from 2021, when Colorado was 26. I just learned, it turns out the 8th place ranking is simply the office taking today's enrollment number in Colorado and comparing it to other states' enrollment numbers from 2 years ago. With apologies to Earth, Wind, and Fire, do you remember the 20th night of September? It's when we budget nerds learn how much money will be issued in Tabor refunds, except the dollar amount depends on something you'll vote on in November. The budget analysts for state lawmakers revealed the state will issue $3.68 billion in Tabor refunds next year. How much will you get? That depends on the outcome of Proposition HH in November. If it passes, your next property tax bill will increase at a lower amount than if it fails. Also, all taxpayers will then get an equal Tabor refund next year in return for some of your future Tabor money. If HH passes, the state estimates that everyone will get $898 in a Tabor refund next year. If HH fails, next year's Tabor refunds would range from about $600 for the lowest earners to $1,900 for those making the big bucks. Here's the kicker. The state expects another $4 billion in Tabor money over the next 3 years. Proposition HH would allow the state to keep part of that surplus to backfill the lost property tax revenue to fund water, fire, and hospital districts. Under the latest estimates, that would mean reducing Tabor refunds by $30 to $100 starting in 2025. How is the state going to reintroduce gray wolves by the end of next year if the state still doesn't have any? Everything's fine, according to Colorado Parks and Wildlife, even though the state agency gets rejection after rejection from other states when it asks, hey, psst, can we have some wolves? Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming all turned Colorado down, so now the state's on to its fallback options, Washington and Oregon. Those 2 states are still considering. So now, Colorado's asking the Nez Perce indigenous tribe for some of their wolves, which was never part of Parks and Wildlife's plan in the first place. Colorado voters approved the wolf reintroduction plan in 2020. Let me correct that. The metro area voters mainly approved the wolf reintroduction plan in 2020, outnumbering the no votes in the rural counties that will have the wolves. Voters gave the state until the end of this year to get it done. Our Aaron Adelson asks, what would happen if the state fails to meet that deadline?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Law school classes operate in the world of what if.
Yeah, exactly.
We brought our what if to DU law professor Kevin Lynch.
Yes.
In 2020, Coloradans voted to reintroduce gray wolves by the end of this year. Lynch says no legal action can stop that.
I've tried to think, in advance of this, what the legal theory might be, and I've kind of struggled on that.
Here's where Colorado's search stands. 3 states have said no, 2 states and a tribe have not given Colorado a final answer, and no one has said yes. Lynch voted to reintroduce wolves and wants to see the state succeed, but what if they can't by the end of the year?
If they're not able to, it's hard to imagine what someone would do to challenge them, they're not going to be able to go back in time and reintroduce wolves that they don't have.
Lynch says someone might still sue for Colorado's failure, but a judge can't just abracadabra wolves.
They will order them to do something that they clearly have the power to do or the ability to do, but they're not going to, ask them to do something unrealistic like that.
If the state does not reintroduce wolves before the end of the year, Lynch says it might be a problem, but not a legal one.
That would be maybe a political problem. Court's not going to order the state to do something that they can't actually do.
Aaron Adelson, 9 News.
The state will still follow the voters' timeline, according to a spokesperson for Democratic Governor Jared Polis, but we were not told what steps his office will take to get wolves here in the next 3 months. Every Wednesday for 3 years, we've brought you causes to care about and nonprofits that help make the work possible. Here's Kyle with this week's Word of Thanks.
When Coloradans in Loveland and Larimer County are making a life and death decision to escape domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking, there is a nonprofit waiting with decades of expertise on how to best keep them safe and eventually help them begin life anew. That's why this week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign supports the organization Alternatives to Violence. Sadly, there is no shortage of demand for their services. Last year, their safe house was 100% occupied. Their hotline took 1,400 crisis calls. They've responded to that need with emergency shelter, safety planning, and the long-term work that survivors of violence need in order to rebuild their lives. That can mean a place to stay for one night or long-term. Transportation for survivors and children to get to school or work if they had to leave their car behind with an abuser. Help paying grocery or utility bills. And when those survivors are ready to move out to their own place, those families get to shop the nonprofit's boutique, free to them, so that they have clothes and furniture, the essentials of life. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word THANKS to 303-871-1491 to get that link to donate. We know that even $5 helps, so I'll match the first 50 donations of $5 to get us started. This is life-saving work being done by Alternatives to Violence, and we can be a part of it.
To see the northern lights in their full glory, a lot of people trek up to Wyoming. We take a look at why the view is so different, without going to Wyoming. And remember in high school when you had a curfew and rules about where you could go? Well, that's how Centennial appears to be treating pickleball. Donk, donk, those new rules. Next. I love saying aurora. The aurora borealis has been lighting up Colorado this summer, and you'd think I know, working in a newsroom, but it was visible even last night. Didn't know. Our view of the northern lights, though, is different than it is up north. From here, we typically see a green and pink glow on the northern horizon. That's because we're getting side-eye from aurora. The stronger the solar storm, the better the view in Colorado. Solar storms are rated like hurricanes. This week's was a G2 to G3, where G stands for geomagnetic storm, but you knew that. The strongest solar storm was a G4 in March. Aaron Moe captured a time-lapse that showed the dancing pillars, but still from that side angle. A G5 is the strongest solar storm, but that would be rare for us to see. Let's just see it right overhead, and that last time was Halloween 2003. Danielle, why are we getting side-eye from aurora?
I mean, the side-eye is beautiful still, no?
I hear it's better if you're just looking straight at her.
Well, yeah, of course. You always want to be head on, but I mean, still a pretty spectacular view, Marshall, especially folks on Monday night and last night up there in northern Colorado, snapping photos, sending them our way. Just spectacular. Tonight, a bit of a different story. We have a few clouds out there and also some storms, especially on the south side of town. As we zoom into the radar into Douglas, Elbert County, these storms slowly moving off to the east and weakening just a bit too. Had a couple of light little showers tracking from Larimer into Weld County, Fort Lupton, Highway 85, looking at some light rain for now. As we go throughout the future cast, the rest of this evening, pretty quiet. We'll kick those storms out of here, but we will be left with a few clouds late tonight. By tomorrow morning, the sunshine is back here for the urban corridor. However, a few isolated showers still popping up early tomorrow morning in the high country. By about lunchtime, a little after, typically the timing that we see the storms come through, it looks pretty quiet across Colorado. Might find a few off to the eastern plains. Otherwise, it should be a dry day for us, and another warm one too. Loving these gorgeous September days. Highs sitting in the low 80s tomorrow afternoon, 90s in Lamar, some 60s and 70s though up into the mountains. A cold front will push through just in time to officially welcome in the fall season on Saturday. Mid to upper 70s for the weekend, but the 80-degree heat is back next week.
Oh boy. One city in the suburb has caused a serious racket, and it's escalated into a full state of emergency. And Colorado's law cracking down on ghost guns takes a step beyond federal regulations, which means enforcement, that's probably going to be a problem. And that's next. Our next question comes from Chris, who anticipates some hiccups when the state enacts its new law regarding so-called ghost guns. Chris wants to know which licensees in Colorado are willing to serialize a ghost gun. Anyone with a firearm without a serial number has until January 1st to get it stamped by a federal firearms licensee, like a gun dealer or manufacturer. So what happens if a ghost gun is turned in but not given a serial number by the deadline? Good question, Chris. Let's start with what we do know. If you own a firearm that does not have a serial number, Colorado law will require you to get it serialized by a federal firearms licensee by January 1st. Democratic State Senator Chris Hansen, who sponsored the legislation, says as long as you have your firearm turned in for that service by the new year, you'll be in compliance with the state law, even if the firearm is not given a serial number and returned by the deadline. Coloradans have thousands of licensees. The lists include gunsmiths, manufacturers, and dealers, but you may run into trouble finding one willing to serialize your weapon for you. Both Hansen and firearm industry trade associations say licensees are not required to do that.
It's something they're already set up to do, but yeah, there's no requirement that an FFL owner offer this service.
You are putting a mandate on firearm retailers or manufacturers, local FFLs, to provide a service for which that they're not directly charged with doing.
That second guy you heard from is Mark Oliva with the National Sports Shooting Foundation, a trade association that lobbied against the legislation. He says federal licensees are currently only required to serialize your firearm if it's legally transferred into their inventory or turned in for additional repairs or maintenance. Oh, this is the first for me. I hope I do it right. Cue the newest Foxy Fear graphic. We're bringing you the latest update on the war on pickleball. We're bombing them now? An aerial attack. Yesterday, we told you it was a dramatic night in Centennial. They were voting on whether or not to fast-track the pickleball issue with an emergency order. City Council talked it out for hours before finally voting around midnight. The new ordinance bans new outdoor courts within 100 feet of homes and requires courts within 600 feet of homes to put up something to dampen the noise. It also creates an 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. pickleball curfew. The city defended the decision, claiming engineers say the sound of the pickleball hitting the paddle can cause hearing impairment, disrupt sleep, and cause long-term psychological issues. I might have some feedback about those three things next, but Aaron's got the real feedback coming my way.
The nonprofit Alternatives to Violence offers survivors of domestic abuse and sexual assault in Loveland and Larimer County everything from the plan to escape their abuser, to a place to stay for a while, to a boutique where they can pick out new clothes and furnishings for their fresh start. This week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign supports that nonprofit's work, and they have been busy lately, helping more than 1,600 people last year. Their safe house was booked year-round. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word THANKS to 303-871-1491 to join me in donating to support work that changes lives, work that saves lives in northern Colorado.
Barney in Centennial has our feedback tonight. Walked by people playing pickleball today where the ball made a muted thunk instead of the obnoxious normal sound. Barney, I hate to tell you this, you walked by people playing tennis. See you next time.